Okay, so I came to the grocery store and I'm going to be showing good and bad examples of some of the principles from the focus design process. All right, so for the very first phase in the focus design process, which is formulate, I decided to do a good and bad example of message. And so I think this is a really good example of message because it shows a picture of the pinto beans, straightforward what it is, whereas ranch style beans, like there's kind of no picture, and beans is smaller than like the ranch style, so in some cases you may not know like what this is. For the second phase of the design process, which is organize, I was going to go with white space or negative space. I think this is a really good example of negative space just because there's a lot of area, it looks really clean, it's grouped together, whereas this one there's just like a lot going on. They don't really leave any room for anything other than like different elements, so it kind of makes it crazy. For the third phase, which is contrast, I'm going to go ahead and show a good and bad example. So this townhouse is a bad example of color just because while it is like using a complementary scheme, they're not very complementary to each other, so it makes it not so nice, whereas this one shows the tetratic color scheme, and I think all the colors really complement it well and gives it a good design overall. So for the fourth phase of the focus design process, which is Unify, I decided to go with repetition. This is a really good example of repetition because you can see that this little shape that it creates, they also try and create it here, just kind of bringing the brand of like Reese's all together. Whereas Raisin brand is a bad example because there's not really repetition in anything that's on this design. So for the last phase, which is simplify, I decided to do these two products as a good and bad example of elimination. This is a good example, I think, of elimination because yeah, they throw a little bit of sauce there, but for the most part it's really clean. They eliminate, you know, the distracting stuff, whereas this bottle is a bad example because there's just a lot going on back here and it kind of just distracts from the name and like what kind of sauce this is. So those are all the 5 phases of the focus design process, and within the formulate phase you have message, audience, sketches. In the organize phase you had shape, proximity, and alignment. In the contrast phase you have asymmetry, value, color. In Unify you have repetition, rhythm, and gestalt. And lastly, simplify, you have evaluation, elimination, and communication. And those are the 5 phases and the 15 principles of the focus design process.